it seems I've been live for a bit. My computer's very slow, and the title is probably not displaying correctly. But I wanted to talk about Western identity. I know it is controversial and a sensitive subject, but I really am trying to help, and I know that there are some people who regard me as an existential threat to their community. Of course, this is hurtful, but then those who want to compare me to a behemoth, an adversary, and a snake in the garden are, well, they do wish to convey their enmity towards me, or should I just say her enmity towards me. Now, why is the enmity so pronounced and existential? I don't get this kind of treatment. Usually the men are more sporting, they're, prepared to at least engage with me before dismissing me as the enemy or radioactive or something of that nature. But I think women lack that ability to be sporting. They've decided that their female intuition tells me that I am a threat to their community, and I'm treated as such. Now, I've been active behind the scenes. I don't use YouTube primarily. Well, I mean, when I'm not on YouTube, I am doing other things, and I don't see myself as a YouTuber primarily, and because I see myself as a political activist and a moral and political philosopher, and as well as a social and political scientist. And today I have been taking an interest in all the forgotten books that I had heard of when I was doing English literature, because, well, you don't read everything you're told about. You don't, you just hear of some, book like, I don't know, Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. You don't actually read it. You have a vague idea of how many volumes there are, but you don't really read it. You just said, oh, this was a very influential book at the time, and you're not even expected to read it because you've got all your set books to read. And obviously, when I'm denounced in such horrific terms, of course I have to take an interest in the person who is denouncing me. And this is what you would expect, if you say terrible things about somebody and you don't really want to even talk about it with them, like, well, let me explain, I am not guilty, something like that. But obviously I didn't deserve a fair trial. I'm guilty as charged. I see Jay is telling me to go home and escape mushroom cloud. I mean, it has occurred to me that it might be sensible to do something like that, but I sort of feel that my place is here because I haven't managed to convey my message, and well, this is something you could do for me. You could actually help me deliver my message, and then I'll go. I mean, if that's what you want me to do, but I don't feel I should be running away because I haven't done what I'm supposed to do. It's really, really very frustrating. I feel that I am some sort of a process server. I've been given papers to serve on somebody who is obviously trying to avoid service, and I must do my job. Thank you for thinking about my safety. But I have certain instincts. Perhaps they're wrong, I don't know. But I've been spending a lot of time doing something. You may know what it is, Jay. And I haven't had much luck because if you have a broken society, then none of the connections work. So if you're talking about a rail network and all the railway tracks do not quite join up. There's been derailments all over the place, and you can't really get for example, from the West Country to London to I don't know, Manchester or Liverpool or Edinburgh, because there's been a derailment somewhere along the way, messing up your connections. And yes, I am looking at a broken society and a broken civilization, and the thing is, I've got the answer. I think I've got the answer. I want to tell you what the problem is and tell you what my solution is, but nobody's listening. What's wrong with you all? Now, I would have thought with people saying to each other, World War III is imminent, you would have thought there would be some kind of organised thought, action, something, but there isn't. Now, we have social media platforms, and I'm communicating to a whole bunch of you all over the world in English, which is very convenient, because it would be terrible if I didn't speak your language, or even if I did, I would, in the olden days, I would have to send, letters by airmail or telegrams. So I can communicate with you in real time. If I had the camera on, you could see me. And I think what I'm saying is very clear, and the solution is very simple. So what is the problem? The problem is, okay, maybe I'm talking to the wrong people. There are people bumping along at the bottom who are mentally ill, suffering from character defects, behavioural as well as substance addictions. I can't expect anything from them. But what about people at the top? What about bigger YouTubers, people who are supposed to care about these things? Jordan Peterson. It's just a code word for what? The dissident right, but not quite dissident enough. So lately I've been exploring that particular group. And they're supposed to be educated and middle class, but sadly for them, they're even more neurotic than the Wignats that I've been talking to. So it makes me wonder, what about the people above these supposedly educated, enlightened, middle class graduates? And it occurred to me that their mental health and character defects would be even worse than the ones I've had the opportunity to come across recently, i.e. even worse. So there are layers of dementia, amnesia, denial, corruption, that it may be beyond me to cut through. Just because, well, everything's so difficult. You try to make a point, they pretend not to understand you, they remove you from the group without ceremony. So what is this existential threat that Sherry thinks I represent to her? She's blocked me. She's blocked me on Discord. Doesn't want to talk to me at all. But she's the one who said all those terrible things about me. And I suppose anyone with a sense of justice, I like to think that men, well, in my experience anyway, men are less cowardly. They will say to your face, well, we think you're this, and therefore we must do that. There might be some, a semblance of a fair trial. But Sherry calls me an existential threat, a threat to the community. Now, what is she talking about? I don't think I threatened any community. My ideas are very easy to ignore. You can just, social media allows you to block me, to, or even tell lies about me and say I must be excluded from your group because I meant such an existential threat to your group. And if she thinks the groups that are, community that I threaten are, YouTube channels or Discord servers, I just don't see how. I don't think I'm going to make the group disappear by being in it. She doesn't like me, she can remove me, and that's the end of it. Unless, some other administrator allows me in. What would happen? The worst case scenario is, some other admin allows me in. She throws her toys out of her pram. She starts a new group, and then she can say, oh, I threatened the community because the Discord server that she was in moved because there were those who thought I was so terrible that I shouldn't be allowed in, and somebody said I should be allowed to remain, and they couldn't stand it, and then they had to all leave. But it's incredibly childish, isn't it? So I keep thinking again, what is the big deal? What's the problem? I don't think she can explain, and that's why she's been avoiding me and blocking me and not even trying to explain at all. So Jay says, your message is too complicated for the many. It's not complicated. I am saying in my uncomplicated way that Christianity is kaput. And so what does Sherry mean? She means I'm an existential threat to the Trinity. I don't mind putting my hands up to, well, having a go at it. Because it does represent Christianity, and I'm saying it is kaput, and in order to make secular Quranism more attractive to Westerners, I have to say emphatically that Christo-liberalism is kaput. It makes sense. It's a sales strategy, isn't it? So it's not me just saying, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. I mean, yes, I could be this smooth salesman. You've got a perfectly good car. It's working, it's past its MOT or whatever it is in Canada, whatever it's called in Canada, or the US. And I somehow persuade you to buy a new car from me because I'm a used car salesman, and I'm saying, no, it's not even that. I'm saying the equivalent of this food that you are eating is poisonous. It's not fit for human consumption, and you should know because of the terrible things that are happening to you. You should know that all is not right because of, well, do I need to explain to you that things are not right? So what is Shari so threatened about? I mean, she says it in a protective way. We must defend ourselves from this adversary, this behemoth, this snake in the garden. But what have I done other than to say my thing? And if your Christo-liberalism is working just fine and I'm the crazy person for offering you something you don't need, then, well, what is the harm of me saying my crazy thing? But obviously there's something wrong, and as we head towards World War III, thank you very much, Jay, for reminding us of all this. We know that something is deeply, troublingly wrong. Now, I know a lot of people who confuse basic words. Not that long ago, Stephen, what was he doing? He was holding a pendant that he was given when he was christened or something, and said his grandparents gave it to him, and the pendant, which had, I don't know, a saint or something, represented his identity. And I'm saying, fair enough. I mean, I could have some, family heirloom that will represent my identity, of my family, of my, race. But these are all in the past. I mean, obviously we all have to be born in some place, and that will be our birthplace, our country of origin, which may or may not affect our upbringing, because you can be born in any country and, well, not really even know about it, because, very soon after you were born, you could be, your parents could move, or you just happened to be born in some foreign country, but you weren't meant to be born there, maybe, or I don't know. But the point is, people get very protective about their nationality, their parentage, their religion, and yes, I understand it obviously is part of your identity, but I'm saying it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your identity is, because we're basically stuck with it. Whatever race we were born with, whoever our parents are, our class, our race, our religion, all these are inherited from our parents. And I said to Stephen, the best way to think about it is to imagine himself to be an orphan, but also to be given a country to run that presumably he'd like to run successfully, and choose a religion for that country. And when you take away all the sensitive issues about your identity, that you're going to get into trouble if you say that if you're Jewish you wanted to be born Gentile, if you're Muslim you wanted to be born Christian or something. I'm saying that there is an objective answer to my question, that there is a correct answer to my question, and I'm saying if you had a country to run and you weren't worried about what your friends and family would think, because you're an orphan and you didn't have this cultural baggage to burden you with expectations and people getting angry with you because you didn't choose the right thing, because they'll feel offended that you're rejecting their whatever, then it becomes very easy to decide what is the best religion available, especially if you're a Westerner, because obviously it can't be any of the Eastern religions. It can't be Hinduism, it can't be Buddhism, so it must be one of the Abrahamic faiths. And if you're Gentile, it can't be Judaism. And if you're Jewish and had to choose between the two Gentile religions, you're going to choose the one that is closest to Judaism. And as we know, Christianity is kaput, and there's only one left. But what I began to discuss was the question of Western identity, and I've had a look at Jung and Freud and who wrote about our feelings, our religious feelings, animism and that kind of thing. And there's a big book called The Golden Bough. That was the one I was going to talk about when I was doing English literature, and I knew it was very controversial, and I'm looking at the Wikipedia entry now. The Golden Bough, a study in comparative religion, is a wide-ranging comparative study of mythology and religion written by the Scottish anthropologist Sir James George Fraser. The Golden Bough was we don't care about, it's published in 2 volumes and whatever. The influence of the Golden Bough on contemporary European literature and thought was substantial. Fraser attempted to define the shared elements of religious belief and scientific thought, discussing fertility rites, human sacrifice, the dying god, the scapegoat, and many other symbols and practices whose influences had extended into 20th century culture. His thesis is that the old religions were fertility cults that revolved around the worship and periodic sacrifice of a sacred king. Fraser proposed that mankind progresses from magic through religious belief to scientific thought. And that's fair enough. Nobody's going to deny that, I don't think. Fraser's thesis was developed in relation to an incident in the Aeneid in which Aeneas and the Sibyl present the golden bough taken from the sacred grove to the gatekeeper of Hades to gain admission. The incident was illustrated by Turner's painting of the golden bough. Okay, I'll have a look at that one. Didn't know it. In case you're interested, I will give you a link to it in the chat. Okay, Jay's being very scientific now, talking about the well, the thing is, we are born and we are here and we are considering our future. Okay, so there's a painting and I don't really know what it's about. In fact, although I have, of course, heard of Turner, I don't remember this painting. Okay, anyway, the hero Aeneas wants to enter the underworld to consult his dead father. The Sibyl of Cumae tells him that he needs to offer a golden bough from a sacred tree to Proserpine in order to enter. The painting shows the landscape around the lake Avernus, which is the entrance to the underworld. The Sibyl stands to the left and holds a sickle and the cut bough. Dancing fates in the background and the snake in the foreground forebode the mysteries of the underworld. Okay. Okay, so Aeneas is a hero of the Aeneid. The Aeneid was, well, basically Roman propaganda after the Roman civil wars. Virgil was a poet, and he basically wrote stuff to give Romans a new identity under Imperial Rome, under Augustus I, because that was really what it was all about, a new story, a new national narrative after the Roman civil wars. So I'll read you what it says on Wikipedia about the Aeneid. The Aeneid is a Latin epic poem written by Virgil between 29 and 19 BC that tells the legendary story of Aeneas, a Trojan who fled the fall of Troy and travelled to Italy, where he became the ancestor of the Romans. The hero Aeneas was already known to great Greco-Roman legend and myth, having been a character in the Iliad. Virgil took the disconnected tales of Aeneas's wanderings, his vague association with the foundation of Rome, and his description as a personage of no fixed characteristics other than a scrupulous pietas, I think, and fashioned the Aeneid into a compelling founding myth or national epic that tied Rome to the legends of Troy, explained the Punic Wars, glorified traditional Roman virtues, and legitimized the Julio-Claudian dynasty as descendants of the founders. heroes and gods of Rome and Troy. The Aeneid is widely regarded as Virgil's masterpiece and one of the greatest works of Latin literature. So, there we are. That's what it is, Roman propaganda. So we go back to the Golden Bough. Yeah, let me just read that bit. Fraser's thesis was developed in relation to an incident in the Aeneid in which Aeneas and the Sibyl present the Golden Bough taken from a sacred grove to the gate peak of Hades to gain admission. The Lake of Nemi, also known as Diana's Mirror, was a place where religious ceremonies and the fulfillment of vows and priests and kings were held. Fraser based his thesis on the pre-Roman priest-king Rex Nemorensis at the Fane of Nemi, who was ritually murdered by his successor. The king was the incarnation of a dying and reviving god, a solar deity who underwent a mystic marriage to a goddess of the earth. He died at the harvest and was reincarnated in the spring. Fraser claims that this legend of rebirth was central to almost all of the world's mythologies. What does this story remind you of, boys and girls? It makes you think of the Aztecs. So I suppose it's sort of like, well, if you're going to practice human sacrifice and you're competing with others to practice human sacrifice, you're going to say, well, I sacrifice more humans than, the other lot in the other country. And then I guess to compete against that, you'll have to say, well, nobody can beat me because we sacrifice kings. So, obviously this isn't a good idea, but, you have to understand, how people might go to extremes in a bid to rival each other. Fraser wrote in a preface, sorry, it's a bit, okay. I'll just read it rather than try to. It's just got a lot of names. Fraser wrote in a preface to the third edition of the Golden Bough that while he had never studied Hegel, his friend James Ward and the philosopher J.M.E. McTaggart had both suggested to him that Hegel had anticipated his view of the nature and historical relations of magic and religion. Fraser saw the resemblance as being that we both hold that in the mental evolution of humanity, an age of magic preceded the age of religion, and that the characteristic difference between magic and religion is that whereas magic aims at controlling nature directly, religion aims at controlling it indirectly through the mediation of a powerful supernatural being or beings to whom man appeals to help and protection. Okay, well that's fair enough. Who's going to argue with that? Critical reception. The Golden Bough scandalised the British public when first published, as it included the Christian story of the resurrection of Jesus in its comparative study. Critics thought this treatment invited an agnostic reading the Lamb of God as a relic of a pagan religion. An agnostic reading of the Lamb of God. Well, yeah. For the third edition, Fraser placed his analysis of the crucifixion in a speculative appendix. The discussion of Christianity was excluded from the single-volume abridged edition. Fraser himself accepted that his theories are speculative and that the associations he made were circumstantial and usually based only on resemblance. He wrote, "Books like mine, merely the speculation will be superseded sooner or later, the sooner the better for the sake of truth, by better induction based on fuller knowledge." In 1922, at the inauguration of the Fraser Lectureship in Anthropology, he said, "It is my earnest wish that the lectureship should be used solely for the disinterested pursuit of truth, and not for the dissemination and propagation of any theories or opinions of mine." Okay, so why were all these British people so offended? Because they questioned, well, they were saying that, religion is just some made up stuff. And we have now entered the scientific era. So the Golden Bough challenged the deeply held beliefs of, now when was it published again? Edwardian England. So yeah, I mean, people will get offended by you if you say, well, I mean, okay, if you get your name, if they spell your name wrong or pronounce your name wrong, a lot of people are going to get annoyed. If they get some, basic fact about you wrong, like saying you're male when you're female, or something about your parents, some detail about your parents, and it's wrong, you're going to get offended. It's only to be expected, I suppose. Okay, back to Golden Bough. Robert Ackerman writes that for British social anthropologists, Fraser is still an embarrassment for being the most famous of them all, while they now dissociate themselves from much that he wrote. While the Golden Bough achieved wide popular appeal and exerted a disproportionate influence on so many 20th century creative writers, Fraser's ideas played a much smaller part in the history of academic anthropology. So mostly it's theory. I mean, I guess if you're an anthropologist, you find artifacts of past civilizations, and you can theorize about what they might have been used for and all that, and that might come into conflict with national narratives. The central theme of the Golden Bough, that all mankind had evolved intellectually and psychologically from superstitious belief in magicians through a superstitious belief in priests and gods to enlightened belief in scientists, had little or no relevance to the conduct of life in Andamanese camp or Melanesian village. And the whole supposedly scientific basis of Fraser's anthropology was seen as a misapplication of Darwin's theory of biological evolution to human history and psychology. Yes, it was all about, they were upset about Darwin already, and now, that here's a further idea about, religion being a passing phase of humanity. And I think a lot of people basically took Fraser as being speaker of the truth, the scientific truth, because Fraser was basically making an assertion that Christianity was merely a perpetuation of primitive myth ritualism, and that the New Testament Gospels were just further myths of the death and resurrection of the King who embodies the god of vegetation. God. All right, so here's basically, making a meal of things. But anyway, a lot of writers thought it was a great idea and wrote about it, including Robert Graves. And there were other books like H.P. Lovecraft, Yeats, T.S. Eliot. So because their poems, were composed, with this idea in mind. A Golden Bough influenced Sigmund Freud's work, Totem and Taboo. Fraser's work also influenced the psychiatrist Carl Jung and the novelist James Joyce, Ernest Hemingway, William Gaddis, and D.H. Lawrence. Camille Paglia identified the Golden Bough as one of the most important influences on her book Sexual Personae. In Sexual Personae, Paglia described Fraser's most brilliant perception in the Golden Bough as his analogy between Jesus and the dying gods, though he noted that it was muted by prudence. So all this speculation, I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, it would be, it's a kind of arrogance not to even, consider the alternative religion. I know that Victorians did quite earnestly discuss Christianity, and the first proposal to disestablish the Anglican Church was made in the Victorian time. But anyway, they didn't quite get round to it, and world wars interrupted. Interrupted these considerations. But of course it was unthinkable, really, with the empire, because you needed the monarchy to impress the Indians, and some of you will have seen depictions of these wonderful ceremonies. I think was it Victoria on an elephant or something, and this was all carefully staged to impress the Indians. Let me have a look at these pictures. Just to remind myself of them. Queen Victoria, India. Yeah, I guess it was all about, your pomp and circumstance, and so it was all about putting on a good show. Aha. So Queen Victoria becomes Empress of India. So they you can imagine how well the crowd scenes, images. It was called a Delhi Durbar. I can't seem to find pictures of it. Yeah, you can find lots of elephants and things which look very impressive. Soldiers. I think it was just a proclamation. Did Queen Victoria actually participate in the ceremony? Not sure. But anyway, you'll find many impressive pictures of did she ever go to India? I'm not even sure. Okay, I'm having a look at Queen Victoria now. Did she actually go to India? I suspect not. Well, when the subject, I have to look it up for you, and I also want to know. Okay, so the British Parliament voted to grant her the additional title of the Empress of India, but did she actually go? Oops. Why am I... Oh, I wish somebody could just tell me if she was actually in India or not. Okay. I should just type, did Queen Victoria go to India? She never visited. Oh, all right then. Sorry about all this messing around. Okay, where was I? So there were these speculative ideas of Fraser in the Golden Bough, saying that mankind, all of mankind, would just begin by believing in magic and worshipping nature, and then trust priests to do their magic tricks, and then work up to, well, really powerful gods like the Abrahamic God, and then move into zero gods and science. And he offended the British public because he was basically saying it was all a story. And Jung and Freud were very interested in his ideas, and so were lots of poets and writers. But what has this to do with white identity? Nothing at all, nothing really, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, okay, so we were, I don't know, once upon a time, our ancestors practiced human sacrifice. Well, we don't want to do that now, do we? So maybe the Aztecs were not that abnormal. since the Druids were known to do this sort of thing, which is closer to home. I mean, have I already said what I meant to say, which is that you should just choose the best available religion if the one you have is kaput. That's all you have to do, and then things will get better. And that's all I'm trying to say. And I just don't appreciate being demonized for that. And I can't quite see why I present such an existential threat to Sherry. Really, I just don't. I was in the Grail Country Discord server, and all I was doing was I was actually responding to previous comments. They were talking about Adam and Eve, and I thought I was making a decent contribution, and I was removed without ceremony. Without warning. It wasn't as if anybody was even disagreeing with me about anything I said. And I've just been unceremoniously removed and treated as the enemy. What is it really? If I've said anything wrong, then, as civilized people, you can say, well, Claire, you said this thing and it's wrong, or it's illogical, or it's immoral. I mean, you can say all these things to me, but if you can't think of anything, I don't think it's acceptable to tell lies about me and demonize me and make a monster out of me and then refuse to engage. I don't think it's quite fair. But perhaps Sherry's behaviour is a manifestation of feminine rivalry. I don't know, I'm speculating, of course. I can't really read her mind, but if she regards me as such an existential threat, then what is it that does she feel so threatened by? I mean, is she talking about the Trinity when she says community? They both end in T. If she's concerned about the Trinity, then yes, it's indefensible, morally and intellectually. And if something is morally and intellectually indefensible, you should stop defending it. Particularly when it's not working and terrible things are happening to your society and to you as a people. When it's no longer working, I mean, all you have to do is ask yourself what religion is for. It's not there for decorative purposes, is it? It's there to serve a real social and moral purpose, and it's not just the stained glass and stone buildings, which are only the artifacts of a civilization. They're not. I mean, what is the sign of a living religion? A living religion, an operating religion, I should say, would have its principles enforced by law. That is the essence of having an operating moral system. I don't think this is a complicated idea to understand. And I'm just pointing out that Islam at least understands that. It's saying, well, if you believe in the whole narrative of God creating the universe and communicating with humanity through the Torah and the Quran, then you should follow the laws in the Quran. That's all it's saying. You can't really deny it, can you? You either believe it or you don't. If you believe it, then you have to follow it. You have to obey the laws and be rewarded in this life and the next for the good you do, or be punished in this life or the next for the evil you do. And this narrative, this bargain, I should say, is acceptable to many people because it makes them feel good and safe, like children when told a fairy story. So I don't see any problem in believing in this sort of thing again. And it's not that difficult, really. If you have control of the media, it can be easily done. And the narrative that I propose would be, well, we are the people who were in error, and we have now corrected ourselves with a moral system based on the best available guide to humanity. That's it. That's the post-Christian, post-liberal narrative of Western identity. So I see Mr. Jones asking me, what positive message do we have today? I've just explained it to you. I hope that was reasonably clear. Okay, so I've explained the golden bough. I suppose I could do a bit of analysis about Shari's extreme antagonism. So I've been having a look at a few of the Grail Country videos, and they're mostly of her reading to young men. I said earlier that her attitude towards me may be fueled by a sense of feminine rivalry. There's no need, or is there need? I don't know. I don't think that these young men should be reading stories about imagination and it's not okay. Actually, I'll be frank. I don't agree. I wouldn't want any son of mine to be doing this sort of thing with a woman old enough to be their mother. No way. What's she teaching them? Imagination and there's an entire series of these videos about imagination, and they don't lead anywhere. We all know we should exercise our imagination if we want to tell lies, write books, make up stories, write poetry. That's not what is needed now, is it? What is needed is logical thought. The ability to think problems through and arrive at the correct solution. So I suppose if I threaten Sherry at all, it would be, well, through expressing disapproval of the infantilization and the feminization of these young men who hang around her with their childish names like Lukey. No, after a certain age, I don't think you should be called Lukey. You should be called Luke if your name is Luke. You shouldn't be running to Mama or Nanny or primary school teacher. You should, well, just grow up and talk about man things and not be told fairy stories to comfort you as you suck your thumb. That's what I think. You should be talking about principles, moral systems, asking whether the Trinity is idolatry, whether something is right or wrong. You shouldn't be muddying the waters and saying everything is much of a muchness and let's hide away and make believe with our imagination. I see that I won't be popular for saying these things. Is this a positive message? Well, I think it is. All messages of correction are positive, and we should have the character to accept them as such. Now, I do have a solution to these problems. The problem of the imminence of World War III. It would be a lost opportunity if I didn't say what I really think about these things. What's the point? I mean, if we're all going to get blown up, well, we should at least say what's on our minds and say it clearly and say it briefly and not be afraid of hurting the feelings of oversensitive women. So I started by saying that the middle classes are neurotic, and they are. Well, they barely make sense. I've had to look at their videos, and you think, what are they talking about? What's it got to do with anything? And they are literally terrified of discussing anything that could be controversial, because I guess they're terrified of losing their middle class jobs. So we know what the problem is. They don't believe in anything. They don't believe in making any sacrifices or risking anything. And then I think they delude themselves by thinking they're cleverer than, well, they're cleverer than anyone who has been cancelled. And therefore they evolve this strange language that obscures what they're trying to say, and then it becomes a code for, well, only people like us know what the hell we're talking about. If you're not one of us, then you wouldn't know. And this makes communication very difficult, particularly when the men are terrified of discussing anything controversial. I mean, I get it if, it's not appropriate. Maybe it's not appropriate at a cocktail party to discuss certain matters. But I think if you're supposed to be talking about religion and theology and politics and philosophy, then everything is permitted, surely, including the banning of porn. I mean, if you don't want to ban it, just say why. Or if you do, say why. Not, oh, we don't discuss these things. Oh, because we're middle class. That's so beyond the pale to even ask such a question. How dare you? So it's the intellectual dishonesty that is probably driving all of them mad. And I'm sure that if they could bring themselves to talk about anything honestly and stop distracting themselves by their nonsense, really. What's the point of talking about Jung or Freud? Just do the right thing. And if you don't know what the right thing is, then find out through, well, philosophical inquiry and asking questions, and not getting all huffy and puffy when somebody asks you questions that you don't want to answer. So very, very unhealthy attitude. And I suppose if the middle classes are like that, we have to deduce that it is worse in the political classes, where there are people really waiting for you to say the wrong word before cancelling you. So I think this is really what's going on in the Western political establishment. They don't trust each other, they fear each other, they don't want to say the wrong word in case they get cancelled. I'm talking about senior politicians at the top. And so nothing is getting discussed, and we're all kind of being tied together as we roll towards the edge of the cliff. And I have the solution, and nobody can talk about it because they're basically all neurotic and probably spiteful or suicidal. They're basically saying they'd rather die than talk to me or consider my idea, or but I think if somebody sufficiently influential were to give support to my ideas, I mean Jordan Peterson, for example, then they might change their minds. But I listened to Jordan Peterson yesterday in Ephesus. It was a strange sight. There was this man talking very quickly, using his abstract jargon. And it struck me how weak it all was, all these sort of big words that just didn't do it for me. When really what we wanted was a sermon. We wanted to be told what to do for the best. We wanted to be told off for not doing our best or going wrong in some way. And Jordan Peterson didn't really have it in him to say anything about that. He was just using all those big words and trying not to get into trouble himself. He wasn't suggesting solutions because that would be too dangerous and he would get cancelled. And they're all like that. John Vervaeke, what the hell is he on about? Honestly. His big arm gestures are really quite comical. I know they're supposed to signify passion and sincerity, but it's all empty words. I mean, what the hell is he on about? Well, he's not going to tell us, and we're not meant to know. Maybe if we meditate on it a bit more, we will. But mindfulness, what's that all about? You just sit there and think of nothing, and you think the world's going to get better, and what's this about going to a different church on Sundays and the world is going to get better with these ortho bros? It's a form of narcissism, isn't it? You know, everything's wrong, but if I go to a different church on Sundays, everything's going to get better because the world hangs on me going to a different church on Sundays. What the hell are these people thinking of? And why do they go to Orthodox Christianity? Is it because they want the Christianity of Putin? I mean, if the government were getting really mean, they just hunt you down just like that. It's like, you go to an Orthodox church, you must be a white supremacist and a Russia spy. A Putin supporter. They're just not very bright, are they, these so-called middle class graduates who somehow prefer to not talk about anything, really. They don't want to talk about politics. They want to talk about imagination. They want to hide away and make believe like little frightened children. And that is really the problem.